Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Genealogy, Newspapers and Print Resources. Before we get started, just one thing. We acknowledge that the Boston Public Library's Central Library stands on land that was once a water-based ecosystem, providing sustenance for the indigenous Massachusetts people, and is a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. We are committed to land acknowledgements for all locations at which we operate. We reaffirm this commitment to set the context for our planning, deliberations, and public engagement will take place from the spirit of welcome and respect found in our motto, free to all. So just a few notes before we get started. This program is being recorded. I will be sending a link to everyone who has registered once it's been uploaded to our YouTube channel. The chat box has been disabled, so please use the Q&A box if you have any questions. And just in case any of you didn't get the handout, I am putting it into the chat box right now. And again, and if you have any questions, we will have plenty of time to answer them at the end. So please feel free to type any questions you have about the presentation into the Q&A box. My name is Jessie Wheeler. I am the genealogy specialist here at the Boston Public Library. I work in the Research Services Department at the Central Library in Copley Square. So this is just the basics of what we're going to be covering today. We got a lot to get through, so we're going to try to get everything done, but we will have time for questions. We're going to go over just basics about the newspaper collection, including microfilm and databases. We're going to go over how to find an obituary in microfilm. We're going to talk briefly about some other useful things that you can find on microfilm or microfiche. We're going to talk about how to find an obituary in a database. We're going to go over some other resources online for newspapers. And we're going to talk about print resources, where they are, how to get them. And we're going to go over just a few of the selected print resources we have available at the BPL. And then we're going to talk about some useful websites. Just another note here, you don't have to worry about writing everything down. As I said, this is being recorded. And I will be sending everyone a PDF copy of my slides once we're done with class here this evening. So you will be getting this information later, so you don't have to worry about writing it all down. Also, another note, normally I would have a camera on, but I'm in a different room than where I usually am, and the lighting situation is not good. I looked green, so we're not going to be doing that tonight. All right, newspaper collection basics with microfilm and databases. This is our old area where we used to be set up. That is a microfilm reader that you can see on the desk there. We do have microfilm readers that hook right up into the computer, so you can view images on the computer monitors. So just one little thing before we go on. This is just a little pet peeve of mine. On the left, you see a roll of microfilm. It is, as the name implies, it's a roll of film. And on the right, we have microfiche. These are little rectangular sheets. They are two different things. That I notice a lot of folks call them both microfiche. They are in fact two different things. So just want to get that right out of the way. So the BPL has a lot of newspapers on microfilm. We have a link here to a research guide all about the microfilm. We'll just take a quick look at that now if it's going to load for me and go away. Sorry, as I said, I'm on a different computer than I usually am. Okay, start player data. There we go. Okay, so this is just what the guide looks like. You can see on the left hand here, there's going to be links to all the other different guides we have here. We're going to just take a look at Boston newspapers. So this is just the Boston newspaper we have. This guide is about 16 pages long. So that just tells you just how many we have, because this is just for Boston. And you can feel free to take a look at that guide in more in depth later if you want to see what else we might have. So we do have a lot of newspaper. It is primarily from Massachusetts, but we do have newspapers from around the world. Primarily in the United Kingdom, Ireland, England, those places. So starting in the recession, we had to cut a lot of subscriptions. So from about 2008, 2009 to the present, the only newspapers we're going to have a microfilm are the Globe and the Herald. After that time, that's all we're going to have. So we're not going to have anything more recent than 2008 for any other microfilm sets. Microfilm is in library use only, and you do have to request that at the Research Services Desk, which is in the Washington room, which you can find on the second floor of the McKim building, which is the older, fancier building that you all may be familiar with. You do have to have a physical library card with the BPL in order to request any microfilm. However, if you visit us in person, if you're from out of state, you can get a research card, so you'll be able to use anything in the building, including microfilm. As you could see in that picture earlier, we do have microfilm readers attached to computers, and those are also scanners. So, oops, I forgot to update this. So printing right now is free, but normally it would cost 15 cents a page for black and white and 75 cents a page for color. However, we usually recommend scanning and saving if you have a flash drive. That is the absolute easiest thing to do, and it's also free, as is emailing images. Emailing images is a little bit more cumbersome because we don't have an email button. You'd have to save it to the computer and then open up your email. Okay, so the most requested things we get asked for from the microfilm collection are obituaries. So we're just gonna go over the basic process of how you can find an obituary. So information that you absolutely need to have before you request an obituary or want to find it, you need the person's name, their date of death, and the location of death. These are absolute must-haves. You need all three pieces of information. Then what you would need to do is check the newspapers lib guide, which we just showed you, to see if we have a newspaper from the right location that covers the right time period. Then, yeah, I'm sorry, we're in Washington room now. I forgot to update these. I am sorry about that. So our desk is now in the Washington room, as I said before. Once you go to the desk, you would need to fill out a request slip for the microfilm that you're looking for. I'm going to show you an example of that in a bit. Library staff will get the film for you. We'll show you how to use the machine. Then you can look for the obituary. If you find it, you can print and save results. If you're having trouble, ask us for help. And that's true for any step in this process. If you need help in figuring out when and where a person died, definitely ask us for help. So for an example, we're going to look for the obituary for my grandmother. So just this is good information to have just for genealogy research in general. If you're looking for a married woman, you should try looking for her husband's name. So my grandmother's name was Jeanette Ann Herman, her maiden name was Archie. My grandfather's name was William Herman. And this was during the time period where women were still often referred to by their husband's names. So you'd want to keep that in mind. You can look for her under her own name or under her husband's name. So we have her name. We have her date of death, which was November 1st, 1968. And we have the location of her death, which is Pittsfield, Massachusetts, which is where I am originally from. So the first image on the left here, you see that is a request slip. So you can see there, you'd write down the call number and the title. So for the newspaper we have covering Pittsfield for the 1960s is the Berkshire Eagle. So we know it was November 1968, so that's what we're going to put in for the year. And then you put in your name, library card number, and then your city, state, and zip code. And I don't know how well anyone can see that. It's a little faded on my monitor, but you can see on the second and third images, we have found an obituary for her. And you can see here, she's listed in the headline as Mrs. W.F. Herman. So she's not Jeanette in the headline. So that's why you want to keep in mind a married woman's married name, her husband's name, and her maiden name, because in the first line, she's called Mrs. Jeanette Archie Herman. So this is unusual in that it was published the day she died. I can tell you the reason that is just from family history that she died very, very early in the morning. So they had time to get the announcement in that same day. That's fairly unusual. Normally when you're looking for an obituary, it'll be the next day or the day or two after. Another thing to keep in mind is Pittsfield's a small town. So pretty much anyone who passes away there, they can get a full obituary. This isn't really the case for Boston. Most folks will just get a smaller death notice that basically looks like a classified section. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So just a few other useful things that we have on microfilm and microfiche that you might need, that you might want to look at for genealogy research. One of the most widely used collections are the city directories. We have a collection of Boston city directories on microfilm that cover the years 1790 to 1960. So it's not for every year, particularly early on. They did not publish it every year. A lot of these volumes have also been digitized, and you can see them online. We have another guide here, which again, you'll see a link to this in your handout, as well as on the slides when I send them to you later. Links to all the different directories that have been digitized. You can also see a lot of these in ancestry.com. There's a bunch of them that have been uploaded there, and that's pretty cool because it's searchable. You can type in your keyword search for that. We do have guides, city directories for cities and towns all over the country. It is predominantly for Massachusetts, but we do have a set that covers other cities all over the country. It's going to be primarily bigger cities. So I believe we have New York, Los Angeles, I think Chicago, and a bunch of other places. Another thing we have on microfilm are telephone books, and believe it or not, we have them going all the way back to 1894. There were people that had phones back then. They're not very long, but they did exist. So we have those from 1894 to 2001 on microfilm. We also have some covering from 1974 to 2005 on microfiche, which are those little plastic rectangles I showed you earlier. We do have some in hard copy for other years, just for Boston, but it is a little scattered because it was a little scattered. So definitely ask us if you're looking for something that's not covered here in a year that's not covered here. Definitely ask us. We might have it. Okay, now we are going to talk about accessing newspapers in databases. You can see here on the right, that's just a small listing of the ones that we have. And you can see a full listing on our website. And again, all these links are in your handout, so you don't have to worry about writing them down. And so this is a full list of newspapers. Most of the ones that you're going to want to use for genealogy research will be down here in the historical newspaper section. We have recently gotten a database called MyHeritage. It is a general genealogy database, but they have a large collection of historical newspapers. So they're under here in the newspaper section as well. So we're pretty excited about getting that. I will warn you, the search function is not the best. You can really just search for a name. So to access these, you need either a physical card. If you have one, you're all set. You don't need to get an e-card if you have a physical card. However, if you don't live in the area, but you live in Massachusetts, you can get an e-card on our website. And anyone who lives in Massachusetts can get one. Another thing to note, not all of them are going to be available remotely. So there will be a note on the website if it's not something that you can use from home. So just a listing over here on the left of some of the most used ones. We have 19th century US newspapers, which is exactly what it sounds like, newspapers from the US in the 19th century. And it includes several newspapers from Boston. We have the Boston Globe going all the way back to its beginning in 1872. We have the Jewish Advocate from 1905 to 1990. And we have the New York Times from 1851 to 2015. Why these four in particular are fairly cool is because you will get photographic images of the newspapers. It's not just a transcript. So you get to see what it actually looked like when it was published. And that can be pretty interesting. Okay, now we are going to go through how to find an obituary in a detailed database. So just like before, when you're looking in microfilm, you will need the name, the date of death, and the location of death. Then you're going to want to check the list of newspaper databases to see which one would be the best one for you to use. Then you're going to want to log into the database. If you're doing this from home, you would need to type in your card number and your PIN. If you're in a BPL location, you just would need to click on the link from the website. Then you would want to go into advanced search, put in the person's name, and put in the date of death. You don't need to put the exact date of death in. We usually recommend putting in the month and the year because, as I said, my grandmother is an odd exception. Generally, the obituary won't be published on the date the person died. Once you have all that information in, you're going to click search and look through the results. If you find it, then you can print or save it. And again, if you're having trouble, ask us for help. That is what we're here for. So we're going to go through another example. This person was chosen at random. I had a coworker just pick a day, and then I just picked a name on there. So we're going to look for John Furlong. We know that he died on March 22nd, 1913, and he lived in South Boston. So what are we going to do? We're going to look ahead at the list of databases, and we do have the Boston Globe for that time period. We're going to type in his name and the month and the year that he died, and we're going to find these two things. So we're very lucky here. Normally, for anyone who died in Boston, you're just going to find a notice like the one on the right. That's a very short notice that's crowded in with dozens of other notices on the page. These sorts of notices will generally just have the person's name, their spouse's name, and information about the services. That's all they're going to have. And this one also has information about his membership in fraternal organizations. But this person was fairly well known in the area. He had a prominent position. So he actually has an obituary. He has a little write-up. It's not very long. It's literally just this. But these can be very useful. That can give you more information about the person who died. So, you know, here he worked with Banker and Tradesman, which is a very important publication in the finance world. So that's why he was considered important enough to have a full write-up in the Globe. And you can see here he lived in South Boston for 50 years. They'll tell you the day that he died. They'll tell you his survivors. So not only his wife, it'll tell you his children. So we can see here he had one son and 3 daughters, and none of them were married at the time. You can see they're listed with their first names. If they were married, given that's 1913, they probably would have been listed as Mrs. whatever their husband's name was. And also tell you where he was born. Again, he was born in Cuba and came to Boston as a child. So this actually, you get a lot of information about this person just in one little entry. Okay. Again, just as another reminder, I will be sending a follow-up email after this. So you're all going to get a link to the handout if you miss it during the presentation. And you also get a link to this PDF version of these slides. So you don't have to worry about missing anything. Right, and that is how you can find an obituary in a database. So beyond databases, we have a few other resources. We have the newspapers at the BPL guide, which we already looked at a little bit. And it has more than just the microfilm. You can also get links to the databases, all of the different databases that have them. There's quite a few, as you can see here. There's just a lot. I also have information about this different special interest newspapers we have. So that things like that would include newspapers relating to Sacco and Vanzetti, college newspapers, entertainment newspapers, women's newspapers, all sorts of different things. And you can just get more information than you probably wanted or needed about our newspaper collection. So I highly recommend this guide. It's one of our most widely used ones. Another resource we have, and this can be useful if you're looking for an obituary, we do have an obituary research index guide. So this will give you more information than I was able to go over today. Goes into much more detail about all the ins and outs of finding obituary and death notices. It can get a little tricky, particularly if you're not sure of where the person died. But like I said, you can always just ask us about that. Wait, let me kind of show you some. Okay, sorry about that. So one resource that, there it is, okay. So this is a database that was put together by staff. If you're looking for an obituary for someone who passed away in Boston, you can try looking for them here. So we do have an index of obituaries, and it's just obituaries. It will not have those little death notices, and it's only from the Boston Evening Transcript, the Boston Globe, Boston Herald, and the Herald American. And this is only from 1932 to 1941 and 1953 to 2010. And I will say it's a very rudimentary search form. You can only use one of these boxes, and you can only use one name at a time. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to look for someone with the name Herman. So it would turn up this results list. So it would have the person's name, and if it's available, their age, the date they died, where they lived, and when the obituary was published. So this person had an obituary published in the Boston Herald on September 15th, 2002. So then you could get this information and then come to us, and we could help you locate it from there. That's, like I said, it's really, really basic. Okay. All right, and we did look at this already, but I'm going to show you some of these a little bit more in depth. So I'm going to go back here. Okay. So the most frequently used database you're probably going to look at will be the Boston Globe. So if we decide to do our search for, let's say we want to see again that John Furlong. So we're going to type in his name, and I usually do suggest that you type in a person's name in quotes, particularly if they have a common name. So we know he died in March 1921. Oh, I did not have number lock in here. Oh, for goodness sakes. Okay. Okay, so the database is acting up right now. I'm going to give it one more try. All right, so when you are searching for a date in here, most that you absolutely need is the year. You don't need to have everything. So I'm just going to go back and see March 22nd. Okay. There we go. Okay, let's see if I can get this up right. Okay, so in this particular guy's, okay. All right, so this doesn't seem to want to work for me right now. So let's get, yeah, okay, so one more shot, come on now. All right, so the database does not seem to want to work for me right now. I am sorry about that. So definitely you can feel free to play around with it if you'd like. It's the Globe is one that you can use from home. Okay, and where did I leave off here? There we go. All righty, so moving right along. Now we are going to talk about some print resources. So just basically, and first we're going to start off where they are and how to get them. This picture right here is Bates Hall. That is where I'm sitting right now. Generally, if you Google the Boston Public Library, you're going to see a picture just like this of the beautiful ceiling and the green reading lamps. So when you're requesting anything, any of these print resources, these are where you're going to go. So there's the Research Services Desk, which is those materials that you need to request from there. They're going to be marked in the catalog. They'll either say Social Sciences and Bates Hall, alcove, reference desk, annex, cabinet, and balcony. But you don't need to really remember all that. If it says social sciences, just come to the Washington room. Also, if it's a government document that you're looking for, there's not going to be any location after social sciences. So like I said, if it says social sciences, just come see us in the Washington room. Other materials, another place that you're going to want to look for these things are the central delivery desk. So we're going to talk a little bit more about these, but that's going to be all of our published family genealogies. So you can see here, it's circled in green. This is Bates Hall. And this is the Washington room. So that's where we're going to be sitting. So this is where you're going to want to come. This is up on the second floor. And then the delivery desk is right outside the Washington room. All right, so how are you going to get these? Anything that we hold in research services that isn't either in Bates Hall or the alcove, you have to ask us for. And right now, until we get things moved over, you are going to have to ask us for help getting things from the alcove as well. Anything in the central delivery desk, and that will be marked in the catalog, you have to request at the delivery desk, which, as I said, is located on the second floor, right next to our room and next to the hallway that connects the two buildings. You do have to have a library card with the BPL in order to request anything that's not in Bates Hall, the alcove. Like I said, you do have to ask us for help retrieving things from the alcove, but you don't have to put a slip up for it. We're in the process of moving still, so things are a little situated. So I am not able to check the hand raising. So if you have a question, please pop it into the Q&A box. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about just a few of the useful print resources that we have here. So this here is the balcony. That's one of the locations that we talked about before. You can see here, we're going to talk about one of these sets here, and those are the Harvard class reports, but we're gonna talk about those. Excuse me one moment. Okay, so one of the little known collections that we have that doesn't get used very much is the non-Boston list of residents. This is just from Massachusetts. For instance, here we have an example here that is from Marlborough. I believe that's for 1940. So this is how they're going to show up in the catalog, at least how this one's going to show up in the catalog. So it's a little random. The ones that we don't have complete runs. It's basically just based on what the town decided to send us. You can search for some of these in the catalog, but not all of them are in the catalog. If there's if you're looking for a particular town, definitely just ask us. And we'll see, and we'll check on that and see if we have it. So in this particular example, you can see this is from Marlborough. It'll have the name, age, street, house number, and occupation. And for this one also has nationality. But that's not going to be a guarantee that all of them will have that. That varies from town to town as to what information is in which directory. Okay, as I said, I can't really do hand raising right now. If you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A box. Okay, so society directories. I am a big fan of these. I think they're a lot of fun to look at. So they are kind of like what they sound like. They're for the society people. So it's really just going to be wealthy and prominent citizens of Boston. So the example we have here on the right is from the Clark's Boston Blue Book. We have a complete run from 1876 to 1937. And these have the ones that we have, they have all been digitized. So we have links to those online. And again, this link will be in your handout. See if we can get the browser to work. There we go. Okay, so you can see here, these have all been digitized. And these are going to be links to the Internet Archive. There we go, and you can just turn the pages. They are lit. You can't really tell the size from here, but it's a little blue book. So that's why they're called the Blue Book. So there we go. So this example on the right is interesting because I don't know how well you all can see here on Wells Avenue at 39 Wells Avenue, we have Mr. and Mrs. John F. Fitzgerald, who was at that time the mayor of Boston, and also somewhat more importantly for history's sake, he is the maternal grandfather of President John F. Kennedy. Interesting thing about this and the social register, which still comes out, we still get the social register. We have it going back from 1890 to the present, I'm sorry. they are, Mr. and Mrs. Fitzgerald were not included in the social register, despite the fact that they were very wealthy and prominent, and he was very politically important. He was not in the social register. Social register at that time was really just for white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and the Fitzgeralds were Irish Catholics, so they were not included in the social register. So that's just something to keep in mind. So yeah, so that's just something that I think is interesting. So these are just pretty cool, and there's more information about these and we in the directory section of the Genealogy LibGuide. And again, there is a link to this in your handout. So this is perhaps one of my favorite underused resources. I am always trying to get folks to use these and try to make them more widely publicized. The Harvard class reports. These we have from 1813 to the present with gaps. It's a little spotty early on in the early 1800s, but we do get them regularly. We're a little behind because of the pandemic, but we do still get them. These are class reports for Harvard classes. These would be every year, the alumni, the group that is responsible for organizing this for their particular class year sends a form out to all the alumni that they have addresses for with a basic questionnaire, and then they are free to fill out that information and put in a little write-up about what they're doing, what they're up to. They are submitted by the alumni themselves. So you can get a pretty good glimpse into what they thought was important for folks to know about themselves. In this example on the right, you can see pretty clearly, this is FDR, and this is in the class of 1904, the third report. So at this time, you can see he was married, he had children, he lists his children's names and what his current occupation was. I can tell you this is pretty brief for him. There are other reports where he basically had 2 whole pages to himself with his write-up. So he had a lot to say in some years. Other reasons why these can be useful is that it will usually include information about any class members that died since the previous report. So this can be one of those good obscure sources that you can look at to find a death date if that's something you're looking for. Another really cool part of this is in the more major anniversary years, so usually the 25th anniversary year, the 50th anniversary year, often they will have a photo section. And if you're really lucky, you'll get a photo section that has photos of the people as students and current photos. So you can kind of compare and contrast and to see how much they changed. So this can really be a gold mine if you're looking for information for someone who went to Harvard. So downside of these though, and why I keep trying to promote them, and why they're little used, they are not all cataloged. So you can't really find all of these in the catalog. I do have a list here. Again, there's a link to this in your handout. So I do have, I try to keep this up to date. And we have a spreadsheet here with all of the volumes that we do have. So you do have to know the person's class year though. So if you know what year they graduated or what year they were supposed to graduate, they will sometimes include information about people who attended the class but didn't technically graduate. If you know that year, then you can see which ones we have. So for instance, for class of 1948, we have the 3rd all the way up through the 70th. Another interesting thing about these, up until the early 1960s, they did a report for the 3rd year. So let's say this person, so this is class of 61, they had a report in 1964. Like I said, they did stop doing that and went with the more standard every 5 years. And also really early on, so going through at least the early 30s, they did one for the 1st year. So the first report available for 1932 would have been 1933. So obviously not much would have changed. And I think that's probably why they stopped doing it. So these days they just do every 5 years. So the most recent one we have was actually a commencement report for the class of 2020. So like I said, we should have a few more than this, but we are a little behind both because of the pandemic and also because we're a little short-staffed. All right, so now these are also can be really good sources of information, published genealogies. So these are books that are put together either by a member of a family and they're documenting their own family, or sometimes they're put together by professional genealogists or writers. A lot of them, the standard layout is going to be this example on the right from the history of the Putnam family. It'll have an entry for a person, it'll have their name, it'll have in parentheses next to it the line of descent to the first person in the book. So consider the person considered the primary ancestor. It'll have information about where they were born, when they died, their spouses, and their children. So there would be entries below them for their children. The children may or may not have separate entries. Some of them will, some of them won't. So, and they'll only have the information that's available. So if you get lucky, you'll get a group like this where there's lots of information for this person and their children. Sometimes also, if you're in a family where a person had a lot to say about their ancestor, or if it was someone that was relatively well known, there'll be an essay, a whole essay about the person's life, and it can give you a lot of information about what they were doing and where they were, and more information about their family. So this is something that's going to vary pretty widely, and that, again, it depends on who wrote it, who did the research, and what kind of publication it is. Some of them are going to be professionally published and widely distributed where anyone could buy them. Those are going to be more the ones that look like the one on the right here. And some of them are privately printed. So those can vary even further. They can be printed by a good printer and look very professional, or we even have several that are basically hand-bound manuscripts typed on onion skin. So it varies pretty widely. A lot of the ones we do have were donated to us by family members. Primarily, we'll have folks who cleaning out their grandmother's attic and giving us this book, or it's someone, they wrote it themselves and they give us a copy. We got several recently that way. Another cool thing about this is a lot of them have been digitized. A few years ago, we had a grant to digitize anything in the public domain. So anything at that time, it was published prior to 1923. Anything we had prior to that time has all been digitized, and there are links to it in our catalog. So we're just going to see if we can find this here. So if you want to look for one of these in the catalog, just do a subject. So if we're going to try to find that one for the Putnam family, we type in Putnam family. So you do the name of the family and then the word family. Okay. All right, so over on the left here, you can do titles you can access online. There we go. So you might get a few random things. Putnam is mentioned in the cataloging record for this, but we're just gonna do this as an example. So you see a link here, click to view digitized item, and it'll open up another tab or another window. Right up to the Internet Archive that will show you a scanned copy of the book. So there are hundreds of these published family histories on here. This is another little resource that I think is very, very useful. Okay, another resource that we have that not a lot of people are aware of are obituary indexes. So we do have a couple of these that are professionally published, but a main one that we like to use, that we have, was actually compiled by a staff person at the BPL, I believe sometime in the 1930s, which is the Index to Obituaries in the Boston Transcript, which covers from 1875 to 1930. This is a typewritten thing that was done by a staff person. And these will include the person's name, the date of death, the date that the obituary was published. So this can be a useful resource if you have someone who died in Boston during that time period. And somewhat related to that, another way you can find information about when a person died are cemetery records. So this example on the right here is from gravestone inscriptions and records of tomb burials in the Granary Burying Ground. That is one of the burial ground that's on Tremont Street near Old City Hall. So these here, like you can see on the right, it will have the person's name, the date they died, And if you're lucky, it'll have the information about where it is. It'll have the plot information. And if you're extraordinarily lucky, you'll get some that have headstone, will have transcriptions of what's written on the headstone. These can be useful, particularly for the older headstones that have worn away and aren't legible anymore, but they were legible whenever the book was compiled. So the granary is just one that we have. We also have them for King's Chapel. We have some. We have books about Forest Hills, Dorchester North, Copp's Hill. We have quite a few of these. Okay, and so these two I've included together because they're basically going to be right next to each other. We have published town histories and vital records. So the town histories are exactly what they sound like. They're histories of a town. We also have a few sets that are histories of counties. So these can be useful if you're looking for someone who was an early settler or founder of a place or someone that was important in a place. They might have information about that person. So the set that we have will be histories that cover from the time it was founded up until the point the book was published, which in most cases is going to be sometime in the late 19th, early 20th century. Shelves right next to these, we have published vital records. So again, I can't respond to raised hands. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box. Thank you. So as you can see in this example on the right, this is from the Vital Records of Beverly. So the set that we have for these cover from the founding of Beverly, from the founding of each town up through 1849 to 1850. And yes, Teresa, these are the tan books that we're talking about right now. So yeah, that's what this is from. This is from the Beverly Tan book. So what Teresa's talking about is there was a big set of these published, I think in the 1910s, 1920s, around there, and they are tan colored, not a very attractive shade of tan. So anyone who's familiar with genealogy research in Massachusetts knows these as the tan books. So that is what these are. So as I said, these will cover births, deaths, and marriages from the founding of a place up through 1849, 1850. And depending on how big the place was, there might be one or more volumes. Some places will, like for instance, I believe Salem has 6 volumes. So how big they are, it depends on how big the place is. Okay, so now we're gonna go quickly over. We're running a little long here, but we have time to get everything in. The New England Historic Genealogical Society Register. So this is the oldest genealogy journal in the United States, and it is still in publication. This is published by, as you can probably guess, the New England Historic Genealogical Society. So it does focus on New England. It includes genealogies, so it'll have some family genealogies. That's what this example here on the right shows. And they also will have articles about genealogical research, covering various topics, including some things about immigrants, articles about a particular place. And we do have these. We still get these in hard copy. So we have these in hard copy. It is also available in the database American Ancestors, which you can access through American Ancestors database, which you can get from the Central Library. All right, so we're wrapping up a little bit here. So I highly recommend looking at all of these. If you have any more, if you're looking for any more information, we have a very robust genealogy research guide with lots of different sections here. And I'm a little biased because I put this together, but we have different sections covering various different topics, military records, how to research women, how to research adopted ancestors, as I showed you before, the section on obituaries. So we have tons of different things here. All right, so we have plenty of time for questions. So if you want to just go ahead and type them in the Q&A box. Okay, Okay, so I'm going to send a link to the handout once again. I hope y'all got it. If you didn't, again, everyone will get an email with a link to it. Okay. So let's see. So Linda is asking, do you have records from Dana Hall School early 1900s? And no, we do not. We don't have any school records, really. What we have are published manuals for the Boston public school system. So that's really all we're going to have. For private schools, like the Dana Hall School, we're not going to have anything. And so that would probably, since they're still around, you would probably actually want to check with them directly, but we're not going to have anything, any school materials outside of Boston. We're not going to have anything for private schools. So I would say check with either the Wellesley Public Library to see what they have, or contact the school library. Okay, let me see. Okay, Anna is asking, were there equivalent social registers or directories for wealthy Black residents? No, there were not, unfortunately. As I'm sure a lot of you are probably well aware, Boston has, even still in some parts to this day, issues with racism. So no, there really weren't. African-American families would have been listed in the city directories, but those are only going to list the male heads of household up to a certain point. And if you're looking in the early 19th century, they would be in a separate section in the back, which is not the best thing. But no, there were not social registers for wealthy Black residents that I'm aware of. If there was anything, it's not something that we have, unfortunately. Yes, Teresa, yeah. So actually, it's funny, Teresa, you had mentioned the Berkshire Athenaeum. And so Teresa's saying the Berkshire Athenaeum in Pittsfield has a complete set of the Chan books. Yes, they do. As I said, that is where I am from, and I know several people that work there. So I'm definitely a fan of the Berkshire Athenaeum. Okay, so Teresa's also asking, can we access American ancestors materials with our BPL e-card? No, unfortunately. You do have to come into the central library in order to use the American Ancestors database. That's just the sad fact. They do have a number of free resources on their website. They do have some free databases that you would need to register for a free account for, but our e-cards will not get you in there. You would have to come into the central library in order to use that. Okay, so Beatrice is asking, is the military record database only for Massachusetts residents? So let me X out of here. Okay. So we do focus on military records here, but this guide here, it is a general guide on how to research your military ancestors. It's not particular to Massachusetts. So if you have any ancestor or relative that served in the military for the United States, this is definitely going to be useful to you. It is just the United States, though, so I'm not going to have any guidance here really if you're researching someone who served in the military in a different country. But yeah, it's not just Massachusetts. There's a lot of these resources on this section that are just freely available on the web that cover pretty much everything. I will say, though, depending on what time period you're looking at, there'll be more or less things here. One thing that I do like to make clear, a lot of military personnel records for people who served in the Army in World War I and World War II were destroyed by a fire. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But yeah, this can be useful for anyone anyone in the country. Okay, so Pat is asking, I am located in Vermont. Can I look at the Boston Library website without a card? Yes, you can definitely use our website, and all of our research guides are available for anyone. These are based just on the internet, so you don't need to have a library card to use the research guides. You will not be able to use the databases, though. Those are strictly limited to people who either work, live, go to school, or own property in Massachusetts. So there is that restriction. If you don't fit those qualifications, we can't give you an e-card and you won't be able to access our databases. But there's a lot of, that's partially why we put all these guides together. There's a lot of information that we have links to that are just free, open on the web. So definitely we can still be useful to you, but just be aware you won't be able to use our databases if you don't have any connection to Massachusetts. Okay, so follow-up to Dana Hall question. So Linda's asking, the people I need to research are in the society page in their home state but attended Dana Hall. So they're likely to have been on the social pages in Boston. I'm out of state. Will I have access to newspapers through your library? So as I just said there, no, you won't be able to use that as you are out of state. They might have been mentioned in the society pages in the newspapers. That's definitely true. But I would say, I don't know where you live, but you can check with your local library to see what's available through them. The other thing you can do is you can feel free to send us a question. You can email us a question, and if you can email us a question to ask@bpl.org, and we can see what we can do to help. It really depends. If you're looking for someone that might be in a database, a newspaper we have in a database, we can definitely check on that for you and send you anything we can find. So that's something, yeah, definitely feel free to email us and we'll see what we can do to help with that. Okay. So Marjorie's asking, is a CAW Mars library card accepted as a physical card? Yes, with the caveat that you do have to register it with us in person before you can use it as a physical card. If you can't come to Boston to do that, you can get an e-card. Anyone who lives in Massachusetts can get an e-card. So you would just go to our website, click on services here at the top, then over here on the left, click on e-cards, and you just click on this blue button here. And then it's a pretty standard form. So anyone who lives in Massachusetts can do this, and then they can use our databases. And if you do get an e-card and you are ever able to come in physically to the library, you can just upgrade your e-card, or you can register your CW Mars card. So anyone who has a library card in any public library in Massachusetts, if you're here physically, you can register that with us and just use that. Okay, so Tony is asking, is there info on Breed's Island? So I'm gonna need you to be a little bit more specific. I'm not sure what exactly you're looking for. So if you can just pop in again, and I can see what I can help you out with. So if Tony, if you could just clarify that for me. Okay. Adrian is asking, do you have Massachusetts town city directories? Newton was the Polk index, Cambridge had one. Yes, we do have city directories for all over the state. So if we head back here, so let's see. So we have a research guide here for directories. You can see which ones we had, Massachusetts directories. So we do have, you have a linked list here. Let's see what we have for Cambridge. All right, scrolling. Yeah, so you can see here while we're looking at this list, just how many we have. So what do we have for Cambridge? Scrolling. Okay, oh, there we go. So for Cambridge, so this will be what we have for Cambridge. It is, looks like we have scattered years from 1847 to 1954. So that's what we have for Cambridge. So that's definitely something we can help you out with if you're looking for things from Cambridge. Okay, so let's see. So Beatrice is asking, is there information on Korean War vets who are in the Army? So I will say, for what we would think of as quote unquote modern wars, there isn't a ton of information that's available online. That is something that, see if I can go back to this. Mostly what's going to be online is primarily what you're going to find is the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. That's the bulk of what's going to be available online for military records. There's not a ton of stuff online for anything in the 20th century. So that's something here that I would recommend you look at this. But probably what you're going to have to do is contact the National Archives and see what they might have. There's really not that much for the Korean War that's online. Okay. So let's see. So Tony's asking, I'm in Kansas, can I get a BPL card for online research? So yeah, as I said, no, unfortunately, we can't do that. You do have to have some connection with Massachusetts, either live, work, or go to school or own property here. So let's see. So as Tony's asking, my great-grandfather was born in Lynn, specifically Breeds Island, but I've not been able to locate any information, so I'm not sure what to look for. So Lynn, let me see. I'm not familiar with Breeds Island. Oh, okay. So, okay. All right. Yeah, Breeds Island. All right. So it depends on what you're looking for. So if you want like I said, it depends on what you're looking for. Let's close some of these tabs. So what I would start off with is try the Lynn Public Library. They're going to have a better idea of what's available for them than we are. I always advocate that if you're ever researching any person and you're not sure where to start, contact the library where they were from. They're going to be the best place to start off with. But I can say if you are looking for things like birth records, death records, marriage records, things like that, Massachusetts, those are held by the city clerk's offices. So if you're looking for those kinds of records, you could get them from there. Okay, let me see if I can get this to come up. All right, so again, this is true for all cities and towns in Massachusetts, and generally, sometimes you can request them online, sometimes you have to mail in a form. So try the city clerk's office if you're looking for birth, death, or marriage records. Otherwise, I would suggest contacting the library in Lynn to see what they have. Lynn is a separate city from Boston, and it's not that far, but it's not that close either. So they would have their own records and archives. So like I said, try the Lynn Public Library, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you out with that. Okay, so we have a couple of minutes left here. So if you have any last minute questions, definitely feel free to type them in. Otherwise, we're going to start wrapping up. I'm going to close some of these tabs here. And I do appreciate you all for bearing with me here with my technical issues. Again, I'm not used to using this computer. I was having some technical difficulties on my usual computer, so this is an adjustment for us all, I guess. So if that's all, then thank you all for coming. This is one of my more popular classes, and I see we have pretty good attendance here. You all had some wonderful questions. If you have any other questions, again, this is our contact information here. We are available via email and phone, and also live chat, which is available Monday through Friday from 11 to 1, and the chat is staffed by a librarian. So those are all the different ways you can contact us. As just another reminder, this program was recorded, and I will be sending a link to this to everyone who's registered once it's up on our YouTube page. I'll also be sending a follow-up email in a little bit that will have links to the handout in case you missed it. And we'll also have a link to the PDF presentation of my slides. So again, you don't have to worry if you missed anything. You'll be able to catch it again. And I'll also, in our follow-up email, we'll have information about our next class and also our next local and family history series lecture. So again, thank you all for joining me this evening, and I hope we get to see you again soon. Take care.